Once upon a time, a merchant vessel was found adrift in 1955. No one was aboard her. Could the Mary Celeste happen again? It did in 1955. This ship, however, is a bit more mysterious than you probably think. What was this ship's name, and what is her story? Today, we'll be talking about the MV Joyita. This is her story. Joyita was built in 1931 in Los Angeles. She was built as a luxury yacht and was made entirely of wood and was 69 feet long. She was built by actor Ronald West and was named after his wife, Jewel. Joyita means little jewel in Spanish. From 1931 to 1936, Joyita would make plenty of pleasure cruises around the world. In 1936, Joyita was sold and registered to Milton E. Beacon. Under his command, she would make many voyages to Mexico and also to a world fair at San Francisco. Then came World War II. In 1941, just before the attack on Pearl Harbor, Joyita was bought by the U.S. Navy and was taken to Pearl Harbor, where she was rebuilt into the yard patrol boat YP-108. YP-108 would be in service for the entire war and would be stationed at Hawaii. It is unknown if she actually had any part in the attack on Pearl Harbor and the rescue operations, but she probably did because she was stationed at Hawaii and her port of register was in fact Pearl Harbor. In 1943, she ran aground and was severely damaged. However, the Navy took care of her and repaired her. 108 served for her country for the rest of World War II. Along with giving some new pipe work, in 1946, the Navy surplused 108 and took several equipment away to be classified as a U.S. Navy ship. Then she would be sold to the firm of Louis Brothers in 1948. It was at this point she was renamed Joyita. Once again, in 1950, Joyita was sold, this time to William Tevers. However, he didn't find much use in her, and so sold it to a friend of his as a professor of Hawaii, a Dr. Catherine Lalua. And then she would sold her Joyita yet again in 1952. This time to a man that would be her final captain. Her captain for her final years was Thomas H. Miller, nicknamed Dusty. He was living in Samoa and used Joyita for fishing and merchant businesses. However, in 1955 became his last year of command in the year for Joyita, but it was not in a very good way. Around 5 o'clock a.m. on October 3rd, 1955, Joyita departed the Apia harbor for Tuglua, which was an island a group of islands a couple miles away. She was supposed to reach there in just 2 days. Her human cargo consists of 16 crew members and 9 passengers, including a doctor from World War II and 2 children. However, her departure for Toklu did not go so well. Joyita was supposed to set sail the previous day at the noon tide. However, her port engine clutch failed, leaving her to set sail on October 3rd with only 1 engine. It would be the final time that the passengers and crew of Joyita would ever be seen. They would never be seen again. The journey was supposed to take 41 to 48 hours. However, in Toklu on October 6th, the day after Joyita was supposed to arrive, she was declared missing. No ship or aircraft had ever received a distress call from Joyita, despite her having a radio on board. A search party was set over 1,000 square miles. There was no sign of Joyita. Then, on November 10th, 5 weeks after Joyita disappeared, the merchant ship Tavalu spotted her. However, she was 600 miles from her scheduled route. And also, Joyita seemed to be in a bit of trouble. Joyita's deck was found to be awash, and she was listing very badly to port. However, this wasn't the worst of the problems. Over 4 tons of cargo were missing, which consist of medical supplies, 80 empty oil drums, and foodstuffs, and timber too. 4 tons of cargo were missing from Joyita, and also the 9 passengers and the 16 crew members were also missing. What had happened to the Joyita and her passengers and crew? One also thing, when the search party aborted Joyita, they found her radio was turned onto the International Marine Distress Call Station. However, there was no distress call. Why did Joyita's captain not give a distress call? Let's take a look at the facts about the disappearance of Joyita. Barnacles were found way above the waterline level on her port side, which meant that Joyita had been in this kind of listing position for quite some time. As you can see in this picture of Joyita, there is damage to her superstructure. Her flying bridge had been smashed away, and her main bridge was slightly damaged. You can easily see a tarp over the wheelhouse of Joyita. What had happened? Joyita carried a dinghy and 3 lifeboats, as you can see right here. However, these were missing on Joyita, as well as many of her navigation instruments. The sextant and the logbook were among the many navigation equipment that had been missing. Also, Miller's firearms that are used in any case of any attack were also missing. Mattresses were found covering the starboard engine. However, the port clutch was also found to be partially disassembled. This meant at the time of the incident, or whatever happened, Joyita was still moving under one engine. But was her starboard engine overheating? If so, did this cause her disappearance? Also, her cabin lights and navigation lights were also turned on, which meant that whatever happened sometime during the night. An auxiliary pump was actually attached to the engine room on a wooden plank between the 2 engines. However, it was not connected. Could this be why Joyita was listing so badly? Despite her radio being turned on, the cable had broken and, however, was repainted, obscuring the blockage. And this could have limited Joyita's radio mileage to just 2 miles. If a ship was more than 2 miles away, they couldn't be hailed by Joyita. Could this be part of her disappearance? Also, the electric clocks on board Joyita had stopped around 10:25, and due to the navigation lights being on as well as the cabin lights, we are to assume that the incident or whatever happened around 10:25 that night. There was still fuel in Joyita's fuel tanks, which meant that she had probably made a good mile before she was abandoned. From the account, she had made 243 miles before being abandoned, around 50 miles from Toklu. But why was she abandoned? It is suggested that whatever happened around 9 p.m. on October 4th, 1955, the second day of Joyita's voyage, with 9 hours of darkness ahead of them. And since the lifeboats and dinghy were missing, could the crew and passengers have disembarked in a rescue attempt? When Joyita was towed into port, they couldn't find out what was actually causing the leak that was causing her to list. Her hull was completely sound, despite her bulges and lower decks being completely submerged. Then they were able to find out that the leak was caused by the ship's own cooling system that had malfunctioned due to corrosion. The first the crew would have known about the leakage would have been when the flooding got over the floorboards. At this point, they could not have found out what was causing the flooding. The most tragic and damning piece of evidence found: the doctor's bag on deck, carrying a stethoscope, scalpel, and 4 lengths of blood-stained bandages. Was one of the crew injured during the attempt of evacuation, or whatever happened? The following inquiry into the Joyita incident would make many controversial. What was most perplexing is that the Joyita's 3 life rafts were missing, but they didn't have no reason to escape the Joyita. What it was that when she was fitted out to carry refrigerating cargo, she had lines of cork, 640 feet of cork running along her holds. This gave her extra buoyancy. This made Joyita virtually unsinkable. But why were the lifeboats gone? The Joyita's incident is mostly called the Mary Celeste of the South Pacific, as Mary Celeste also had an incident of this. I'll be covering that in a later video. However, what caused the crew and passengers of the Joyita to leave the ship, despite the fact she was virtually unsinkable? Now, this was the main fact. Why were the passengers and crew off the ship? Captain Miller would have known that Joyita was unsinkable and had the ability to stay afloat. This means 2 things. 1, either he was incapacitated, or 2, he was killed. Someone was injured, indicating the blood-stained bandages. But who and why? This would have caused the rest of the crew and passengers to panic and left the ship. However, that doesn't explain the fact of why 4 tons of cargo were missing from Joyita's holds. This means that either it happened during the evacuation, or else she was found abandoned and some cargo was taken from her. But why didn't anybody call in saying that that they had found Joyita, or had taken 4 tons for cargo? A Captain S.P. Brown, a friend of Miller, said that he would never return on Joyita, saying that due to her unsinkableness. However, Brown did know the tensions between Miller and his American first mate. His first mate, Chuck Simpson, was known again to pretty arguments with the captain, and they knew that tension would boil over sometimes. Brown thinks that the captain and his first mate got into a struggle and fell overboard and were either killed or severely injured, which caused the passengers and the rest of the crew to panic and get to the lifeboats. Still, that doesn't explain the 4 tons of cargo missing. Then there were other things that said that could have been the reason why Joyita's passengers and crew disappeared. A source that is currently unknown where it came from had said that the Joyita had passed through a fleet of Japanese fishing vessels, and that said that Joyita saw something the Japanese weren't supposed to do. Japanese tensions were high, even though this was 1955, and it was well over 10 years out of the end of the Second World War. There were still tensions rising, though. Could the Japanese have something to do with the disappearance of Joyita and her crew? This was also put in the newspaper, suggesting that the Japanese had something to do with this, but there's no proof of it. However, due to this happening during the Cold War, they say that the passengers and crew of Joyita could have been kidnapped by a passing Soviet submarine. This doesn't mean, however, her flooding and also how her bridge deck, her superstructure, is damaged. How did that happen? There is also the rumor that modern-day pirates attacked the vessel, including the 25 people on board, casting their bodies into the sea, and taking some of Joyita's cargo. This would explain the bloody bandages, but still, this doesn't mean, why her superstructure is so damaged. Could it be insurance fraud? Miller was known to have great amounts of debts after several unsuccessful fishing trips with Joyita. However, the police soon conclude that this was not the reason for Joyita's disappearance. Then, there was the saying, a mutiny. The subsequent new owner of Joyita, Arthur Malmhen, made his own investigation for the disappearance of Joyita's 25 passengers and crew on board, and he also made into his book The Joyita Incident in 1962. Robin Malmhen thinks that the incident all began during the flooding and when the pumps failed, and that the mattresses were covered in the starboard engine to protect it from spray or stop it from overheating so much. However, the mutiny question is still in there. Malcolm thinks that Miller, thinking that knowing Joyita was unsinkable, decided to press on. However, Chuck Simpson and many other crew members demanded to turn back. This would have caused a mutiny or fight aboard. Miller would have been injured, going back to the blood-stained bandages, and would have left the ship without a lead commander. And during the heavy seas, now Simpson was in charge. But during the heavy seas, if they encountered a storm, this would have meant to the starboard engine cutting out and the superstructure breaking. And Simpson would have known he would not have gone out into the great sea. Simpson would have made the decision to abandon the ship and took the navigation and the injured Miller with them. However, if this did happen, where do they go? It is very unlikely, however, that Simpson would have abandoned a still afloat vessel in the Pacific Ocean. They would have spotted a reef or an island and tried to sail to it. However, in the storm, they might have been swept away, leaving Joyita afloat and empty. And the storm would have caused damage to the superstructure, minding the damage. But that still doesn't mean the 4 tons of cargo that were missing. What happened to the 4 tons of cargo? Where did the blood from the bandages come from? What happened to the passengers and crew? It's a mystery that is still continued to this very day. What happened to Joyita after 1955? Damaged and repaired and refloated, Joyita would have been brought back into service. However, there would be many claims that register from the United States and Britain. However, there must be some cases where Joyita would run aground with a reef, or get into less serious incidents with other ships. And at that point, she was known as an unlucky ship, and her owners decided that she was not worthy of a good ship, and called her unlucky. In the 1960s, Joyita was beached and was practically stripped of any useful equipment. It was basically a hulk. However, Robin Malmhen, who made the book The Joyita Mystery in 1962, tried to save her. Malmhen sold Joyita to Major J. Cuttle in hopes of making Joyita into a museum and tier room. However, it never saw daylight. Over the years, the hulk of Joyita would have disintegrated, and piece by piece, she would rot away. Any sign of Joyita was lost, as no other piece has been found of her since the 1970s. So it's likely that she broke up in the late 1970s. A vessel that had a very troubling history in 1955, and thanks to that, she would have many more incidents, but nothing will be even more famous than the disappearance of her 25 crew members and crew passengers aboard her. And whatever happened to them is still unknown to this very day. This video is dedicated to the 16 crew members and the 9 passengers on board Joyita, when she departed on her voyage she would never complete. Whatever happened to 25 people? They were never found again. What do you guys think? What happened on the night the Joyita disappeared? Here's what we know. Her bridge was damaged, there were 4 lengths of blood-stained bandages, and 4 tons of cargo were missing, and she was partially afloat. And there's evidence suggesting that it happened during the night. But what happened? What happened to the passengers and crew? How did it all begin? Probably knows this very day. I am Mike Mites signing out on the story of the MV Joyita, and hopefully, tell me in the comments below, what do you guys think happened to the passengers and crew of Joyita, and what happened to them? Will we ever know? It's possibly the secret of the mystery of the Joyita will probably never be solved. We will probably never know what happened to the passengers on board her. Will their skeletons be found? We'll probably never know.